I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me, and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing.
We're in the third week of our new series, looking at how to build unity in our community and our country. We live in a very divisive age. We experience this division in politics, in social media, even in the church. And it finds its way into our workplaces and schools, and sadly, our social gatherings and family gatherings. This is interesting. Boston College and Northwestern University published a study on the escalation of conflict in this country due to what they termed motive attribution asymmetry. Motive attribution asymmetry, the phenomenon of assuming that my ideology is based in love and your ideology is based in hate. The researchers found that many Republicans and Democrats alike suffer from motive attribution asymmetry and, if left unchecked, could eventually escalate to levels comparable to, say, the Palestinians and the Israelis. That study, by the way, is 10 years old and might very well have been prophetic. It's almost as if we're being driven apart. We can feel it, we can sense it, we can see it. We instinctively know it's a problem that must be addressed for our personal health and happiness, for the health of our families, the cohesion of our communities, the good of our country, and the unity of the church. We know it must be addressed because Jesus said, "A house divided against itself cannot stand." But if we're honest, most of us would have to admit feeling helpless in the face of it all. I know for myself, some days I descend into magical thinking, just wishing it would all magically disappear. Other days I am in deep denial that it has anything to do with me at all. The goal of this series is to find a better way forward. The goal is to strengthen all of us in a resolve to work against the disunity and division we encounter nearly every single day, nearly everywhere we go. We began by offering a couple of caveats and a somewhat deeper diagnosis of the problem. The first caveat: unity does not mean agreement. Unity does not mean agreement. Working for greater unity does not mean that you have to agree with me and I have to agree with you. Neither does it mean denying what we know to be true. Second caveat: unity does not mean simply tolerance and civility. Unity does not mean simply tolerance and civility. We value tolerance and civility. We aspire to tolerance and civility, but by themselves, tolerance and civility don't go deep enough. In a sense, they're superficial. Aiming at unity means building authentic relationships based in real respect. Our ideal for unity is, in fact, the Trinity. One God, three divine persons. Of course, they love one another, but they also do something else together. They collaborate. The Trinity works together. They collaborate to create, sustain, and redeem creation. Our desire for unity is a reflection of the truth of the Trinity deep down in us. We desire unity because the source of our very being, the source of all life itself, is unified, is one. And yet, unity eludes us. Why? Well, as others have argued, the cause of our division isn't really disagreement over policies and politics. It's not even fundamentally a political problem. It's a cultural problem. We live in a culture of contempt. Contempt is the opposite of collaboration. Collaboration values the other. They're valued as worthwhile. Contempt disparages the other. They're judged worthless. And while anger is bad, contempt is worse, because anger, however unattractive or unhelpful, anger attempts to engage the other. Contempt only seeks to utterly dismiss or even destroy the other. After all, if I've come to believe your motivation is hateful, then you become hateful too. Over the course of this series, we're taking a look at overcoming the culture of contempt and embracing and building a culture of collaboration. So 2 weeks ago, as a first step, we looked at simply being more open to what God has to say, being more open to what others have to say. Many people added a name on our prayer tree in the cafe, the name of a person or people who they need to seek collaboration or reconciliation with. You can still add a name today, and our prayer team will be on hand to pray with you, to pray for you, to pray over you, to pray for your intention. Check it out after Mass today. Last week, we looked at embracing selfless sacrifice if we want to build unity. Embracing selfless sacrifice. The cross stands as the ultimate sign of unity because it's the ultimate sign of selfless sacrifice, a sacrifice that bridges the division between God and man. Today, we're going to look at a third step we can take, or attitude we can adopt to build a culture of collaboration. It's a step Jesus himself modeled for us, but a step the apostles were slow to understand. It's also a step we can be slow to understand too. We find it in the Gospel of Mark, and it goes like this. Jesus and his disciples began a journey through Galilee, but he did not wish anyone to know about it. As we noted last week, the Gospel of Mark often shows Jesus on a journey. In a sense, his whole ministry was a continuous journey, a journey to the cross. But whereas at other times he would travel quite openly, drawing crowds wherever he went, this time he doesn't want anyone to know where he is. Why? He wanted to spend time investing in the apostles who will be the future leaders of his new movement called the church. And what was he teaching? He was teaching his disciples, the Son of Man is to be handed over to men, and they will kill him. And 3 days after his death, the Son of Man will rise. He was teaching them what it meant for him to be the Messiah. And he was telling them that it didn't mean military glory or political success. It meant betrayal and crucifixion. But it also meant his ultimate triumph over sin and death. It's the exact same lesson he was teaching them in the passage we looked at last week. And yet, despite the repetition, they did not understand the saying, and they were afraid to question him. It's easy to ask the question, what part of betrayal and murder did they not understand? Or perhaps it wasn't so much the case that they couldn't understand as it was the case they didn't want to understand. No one in Israel at the time was imagining a suffering Savior. Everyone was expecting a conquering Savior, a mighty Messiah who would overthrow the occupying Roman army and restore Israel's glory and national sovereignty. You know, our established patterns of thinking can make it very difficult to change our mind. It's very difficult to change our mind and think differently. The apostles know that Jesus is challenging their mindset, their worldview, their thinking of what the Messiah might mean, and it frightened him. And that's why they're afraid to ask any questions. Look what happened next. They came to Capernaum, and once inside the house, he began to ask them, "What were you arguing about on the way. Of course, he knew exactly what they were arguing about, but he wanted to challenge them to articulate it. But they remained silent. They had been discussing among themselves who was the greatest. The disciples' embarrassment renders them silent. While they couldn't comprehend his prediction of suffering and death, they knew enough that their petty squabble about who was most important was most inappropriate. This is the second time that Jesus' prophecy of the Passion has been followed by a completely inappropriate response that totally missed the point and proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that the apostles simply didn't get what was going on. Then he sat down, called the 12, and said to them, "If anyone wishes to be first, he shall be the last of all and the servant of all." Sitting was a position rabbis took while teaching. So Jesus is emphasizing the importance of this lesson by sitting. And what was the lesson? If you want to be the greatest, if you want your life to matter, look to serve others. Look to add value to other people's lives. Then Jesus goes on to describe just how far he wants the apostles to go in doing that. Taking a child, he placed it in their midst and said, "Whoever receives one child such as this in my name receives me." In our culture, we rightly value children. We celebrate them. They hold a special place in our families and our community. The ancient world was different. With the exception of the eldest male child, children were usually relegated to a secondary position in the household and viewed more or less as non-persons in society. Jesus' point being, we're called to serve people who can do nothing for us in return. That's step 3. Serve people who can do nothing for you in return. In fact, he considers such service extended to anyone a form of service to him. To serve anyone who can do nothing for us in return is a form of service to Jesus himself. So, what does it look like? What does it look like for us to serve others precisely in order to overcome the culture of contempt and build unity? Just like Jesus' teaching to the apostles about the crucifixion, it can easily wash over us. I mean, we get the idea, but so what? What are we supposed to do about it? Well, many things. This step can actually take many different forms. Putting others first may mean using our authority for the benefit and advancement of the people under our authority. Doing the mental tasks, doing the menial tasks at work or at home that no one else wants to do. Quietly undertaking service projects in the community, or assisting an elderly or needy neighbor in your neighborhood. And, of course, since I'm talking about service, you just know I'm going to be talking about service right here in our parish. Actually, we're currently on a bit of a quiet campaign this fall looking to build up our ministry teams. If you'd like to learn more about serving in our parish, text SERVE to 888-77. That's 888-77. Member ministry right here in your parish is an excellent way to serve the Lord by serving people who can do nothing in return. End of commercial. For purposes of this series, however, I want to say to be a servant also means to change your thinking about people you do not agree with. To change your thinking about people you do not agree with. What if we viewed the thoughts and opinions of others as gifts to us and opportunities to grow, or at least to grow in our understanding of our own values and beliefs? What if we chose to serve others by truly listening to the opinions of others? You know, what causes disunity in our culture is not differences of opinion. There will always be differences of opinion. There are people you disagree with whom you like and love to work with. You know, I've worked with Tom Corcoran, my associate, for 25 years. And let me tell you, do we disagree? We disagree all the time, really every day. In fact, our disagreements are so pervasive and so commonplace that when we do actually agree on something, it catches us by surprise. It's kind of like disarming. What just happened? But I honestly believe that our parish and the Rebuild Parish Association are so successful in part because of a long-term collaboration between two people often called the odd couple. We can serve others by really listening and choosing not to pass judgment on them, but instead to welcome their viewpoints as opportunities to learn and grow. As an exercise, how about this week? Seek out that person whose name you left on the prayer tree and invite them to tell you what they think. To tell you what they think about whatever, inflation, immigration, Taylor Swift, whatever. I'm guessing they'll be more than happy to tell you what they think. And really listen to them. Ask about why they hold the position they hold. Listen to understand. Particularly listen to understand the values behind their position. Listen to value them.